Hello folks, this is Jim with Science Talk. I have a really interesting story to share with you. And it involves the human body. Meet your interstitium, a newfound organ. Researchers have found a network of fluid-filled spaces in tissue that hadn't been seen before. Researchers say the organ is a body-wide network of interconnected fluid-filled spaces supported by a lattice of strong, flexible proteins, otherwise known as collagen. These fluid-filled spaces were discovered in connective tissue all over the body, including below the skin surface, lining the digestive tract, lungs, urinary systems, surrounding muscles. According to a new study detailing the findings that was published in the March 27th issue of the journal Scientific Reports. Previously, researchers had thought these tissue layers were a dense wall of collagen, which is a strong structural protein found in connective tissue. Connective tissue, as the name implies, connects parts of the body. Ligaments can be considered connective tissue. Technically, blood is considered a connective tissue, and so forth. The new finding reveals that rather than this wall, this tissue is more like an open, fluid-filled system. So says the senior study author, Dr. Neil Fazy, who is a professor of pathology at New York University Langone School of Medicine. The tissue contains interconnected fluid-filled spaces that are supported by a lattice of thick collagen bundles, Dr. Fazy said. And of course, collagen, as I mentioned earlier, is a protein. So how on earth were these fluid-filled spaces missed for so many decades? After all, there's been a lot of excellent microscopy work over the decades and so forth. Well, they were missed because they did not show up in the standard microscopic slides that researchers have typically prepared to study the cellular aspects and the tissue aspects. Typically, when histology is the study of microscopic tissues. Typically, when you prepare histological slides, there is a certain dehydration process involved, usually with the alcohol reagent and so forth. And so when these slides were prepared, they treat the samples with chemicals, cut them into thin slices using what's called a microtome, and then they apply various dyes and pigments to highlight different features that they wish to look in more detail. Now, this whole fixing process drains away fluid. As I said before, it dehydrates the sample. And any spaces that might have been observed because of the dehydration process, draining away the fluid, these spaces collapse. That's how they were missed for all these years. So how were these spaces found? Well, rather than using standard histological procedures, these fluid-filled spaces were found using a new imaging technique that allows researchers to examine living tissues on a microscopic level. Living tissues. So the researchers are calling this network of fluid-filled spaces an organ, the interstitium. Right now it's an unofficial distinction or designation, but that is the name temporarily at least. For a body part to officially become an organ, a consensus would need to develop around the idea as more researchers study this particular newfound structure. The presence of these fluid-filled spaces should also be confirmed by other groups, Dr. Fazy added. The findings may have implications for a variety of fields of medicine, including cancer research. It's often wondered, how can cancer cells metastasize so readily? Well, now with this discovery, a hypothesis has been put forth that if cancer tumors can invade this layer, it can then more readily spread to the lymph nodes, or just use the fluid to move for these cancer cells to move around the body. Because what's found in these fluid is typically lymphatic fluid, okay? And the lymphatic fluids, along with various other things, will drain into the lymphatic system. Now, the lymphatic system in mammals, vertebrates, is what's called an open system. The lymphatic fluid will actually leave the lymphatic vessels, flood, bathe a particular area to help in various procedures. Which is why if you whack yourself with a hammer inadvertently, you have a swelling and a bruise. Well, the swelling is the lymphatic fluid that's sending various agents to help heal the injury. The circulatory system among vertebrates is a closed system. Blood stays within the vessels, arteries, veins, capillaries. Even if the capillaries are wide enough to allow one red blood cell, at a time to flow through, all the blood is still contained within vessels. That's a distinction. Circulatory system is a closed one. Lymphatic system is an open one. Human body is about 60% water. About 2/3 of that water is found inside cells, and the other third is outside the cells and is known as interstitial fluid. So you can see how they're trying to name this organ an interstitium. Researchers have always known that there would be fluid between individual cells and in between tissues and so on, but the idea of a larger connected interstitium is basically not necessarily a new idea. It's been proposed before, but we're now seeing evidence for this, and now this is gaining new momentum and new traction. The new work is based on a use of, as I mentioned before, a new imaging technique. So this new technology is called a probe-based confocal laser endomicroscopy, or PCLE. You can see why they use the acronym. That's a mouthful to say. This tool combines an endoscope with a laser and sensors that analyze reflective fluorescent patterns and gives researchers a microscopic view of living tissues. Typically, like for example, during when enemas are given, there's a barium that's usually inserted as part of the enema fluid, and that barium will then fluoresce, and what makes it easier to see what's going on. You can actually see the shape of your colon and so forth, and see what's happening in the colon. Well, it's sort of the same idea. With fluorescing particles, they're able to see what's going on by using the imaging. In 2015, two of the study authors, Dr. David Carr Locke and Dr. Petros Benias, both of whom were at Mount Sinai Beth Israel Medical Center in New York City at the time, were using this technology when they saw something unusual while examining a patient's bile duct for possible cancer spreading. They spotted a series of interconnected cavities in the tissue layer that did not match any previously known anatomy. When a pathologist made slides out of this tissue, the cavities disappeared. This was a mystery that was later found to be a consequence of the slide making process. In the new study, the researchers first used PCLE on cancer patients who were undergoing surgery to remove the pancreas and the bile duct. The imaging technique showed the fluid-filled spaces in the connective tissue. When the tissue samples were removed from the body, they were quickly frozen, which allowed the fluid-filled spaces to stay open so the researchers could later examine them under a microscope. Later, the researchers saw these same fluid-filled spaces in other samples of connective tissue taken from other parts of the body in people without cancer. Dr. Fazey said, "The more tissues I saw, the more I realized it's everywhere," he said. The researchers think that the fluid-filled spaces may act as shock absorbers to protect tissue during daily functions. Dr. Fazey noted that there may be quite a bit of information already known about this fluid-filled space. It's just that researchers didn't know what they were looking at. So now the researchers have planned to go back to the scientific literature, review it, and see if there is some information that can be ascertained. The new finding allows us to ask all sorts of questions we didn't even know to ask beforehand. Could this area become altered in disease? Could it play a role in driving disease? Just as I mentioned earlier, that this could, a hypothesis is that this could be a way for which cancer cells are able to quickly metastasize over the body, throughout the body. So it goes to show you that just when you think you know everything, or you understood everything really well, a little surprise gets thrown at you. So this will be very interesting to see how this research proceeds and what information they're able to ascertain and derive from it. So it's very interesting for medical studies, and I'll be trying to keep an eye on this for further developments on this story. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications of when I upload new videos. Please spread the word, tell others of my work I do here. Share it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, what have you. I hope you will consider becoming a patron and support the work that I do here. You can go to patreon.com/Science Talk with Jim Massa. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support. Talk to you later.